Hi, I'm Karl Kapp, and today I want to talk to you about something that you might not think much about the value of coloring in comic books for adult learning. Join me and we'll investigate what the value is of using coloring and comics for adults. I got interested in this because my latest book, Action First Learning, has a number of illustrations in it, and someone suggested, why don't we turn those illustrations into a coloring book? And I thought, wow, what a great idea. So here's one of the images from the coloring book. So you can see it's already colored. And I've started to do some research and found out it's actually really good for adults to color. Let's see some of the research. All right, here we are. Why a coloring activity? Well, one is research shows that structured coloring actually can induce a meditative state that relieves anxiety. And a lot of us are a lot of anxious in a lot of situations. So pulling out a page to color and some markers or some colored pencils or crayons can be very helpful. Additionally, coloring can improve certain aspects of attention and focus in adults. Research shows that adults tend to focus better or can focus better while they're coloring, and that can help us with our learning. Additionally, doodling while listening can help with remembering details. In fact, one interesting study showed that subjects given a doodling task while they were listening to a dull phone message had a 29% improvement in recall over people who did not doodle. So this is some pretty clear evidence that coloring can be very important from a learning and meditative result for adults. So next time you need to focus or you need to meditate or reduce your anxiety, consider grabbing a coloring crayon and a coloring book like Action First Learning Coloring Book and alleviating some of your stress. Now, let's look at the value of comics. Again, not a lot of us think about comics as valuable instructional tools, but they can be. What's an instructional comic? The idea behind an instructional comic is that somebody learns something as a result. But how's that different from other types of media? Well, an instructional comic is basically a sequential art form. It's sequential art and a sequential narrative designed to teach knowledge and skills in a cartoon or abstract method. It simplifies complex topics and enhances retention for the learner because the learner can focus on what's important and not all these extraneous factors. Additionally, metaphorical storytelling increases knowledge transfer. So you can move knowledge from the instructional comic to actual situations where you might have to apply knowledge, such as working with somebody who seems frustrated. Those are elements of instructional comics. Instructional comics don't need to be colorful or expertly drawn. In fact, they can be, some of the most effective ones can be actually very simple. Like, take a look at this example. Here you have a very simple hand washing procedure, and you know to look at it in the sequence that it's presented. Put on the soap, you run the water, you lather your hands, you rinse your hands. It's simple, it's effective, and it's abstract, right? It's not very detailed. There's not a lot of color, but it gets across the message. This is the power of instructional comics. And don't just take my word for it. Instructional comics have been used even to help warfighters gain knowledge of their weapons, of their tools that they have to use. For example, the U.S. Army Preventative Maintenance Magazine was a monthly instructional comic that focused on a single topic each month. And this example is how to do preventive maintenance on your M16A1 rifle. So even something as serious as the military teaching weapon systems learned or found out that using comics is a great way to convey a message. You can even see the disassembly process here that provides that information in sequential step-by-step drawings that anyone can follow to help take care of their equipment. One of the reasons that comics are so effective for learning is because the sequential panels in the comics are well known. Let's take a look at some examples to see how the comics actually move our eyes from one panel to another, helping us to understand the unfolding of the information that's contained in the comic. Here you go. Here's some well-known comic panel developments. Even without content, you know where your eye should go, what the overall picture is. In the left-hand side, you can see the overall picture. You can see the subframes that give you the sequence. In the middle, you can kind of see from left to right what's happening, the big moment there in the middle, and on the right, just 4 panels. Let's see what that actually looks like if we add hand washing, for example, to it. So we can see how the hand washing sequence works, where we see the water dripping down, the soap, the lathering, the rinsing. We can see in the middle as well the importance of lathering the soap and then drying our hands. And even at the end, we have that same sequence. These sequences are well known to many, many different types of learners and lots of different cultures and organizations. And so using comics is a shortcut to help people very quickly grasp the sequence, the content, and the narrative of the information that's being presented. And when you think about it, these sequential comic illustrations are all around us. Anytime you get an airplane, it's a comic illustration of what you should be doing in case of an emergency. Again, life and death situations, military situations, airplane situations provide these illustrations in comics. Why not use them in the delivery of learning and development information? It can be very quick, very effective, and help lots of different types of people, no matter what their language is, understand a sequence of activities, a procedure, a process. Very important elements that need to be learned can be given to learners through the use of comics. Comics can be used in all kinds of situations and to convey all kinds of meaning. For example, by looking at this dark cloud over this guy's head, we know he's depressed or upset or angry, right? We know what this means just by looking at the illustration. So comics can teach us a number of things. One thing that they can teach us is critical thinking and decision making. We can look at the panels, we can decide what the character should do, we can make a decision about what's going to happen next, we can predict the future, or try to, and this helps us think critically, which is an important skill that sometimes is lacking in individuals and organizations. Comics can also teach emotional empathy. So they can help you feel what the character is feeling. You can look at the emotion. This person is obviously upset on this particular panel here. We can use comics very effectively to convey all kinds of emotions and internal turmoil. We can use it to get inside the head of characters by seeing maybe dark clouds, by seeing maybe a glow around them, by seeing what they're thinking literally, by using thought bubbles. Lots of advantages of using comics. We can also use them for situational awareness. What is going on in this situation? Find areas of hazards, problems, or mistakes. Let the learner find that type of information. And also emergency preparedness. Look at the situation. Where do you need to go? What do you need to do? What's the next step? All of that can be used by comics to help us teach this critical, sometimes life and death information. Now, we've been looking at still comics and talking about how important they are from a learning perspective. But interactive and comics that you can observe and watch and that actually have animation can be very effective as well. That's the great thing about comics. We can use them as a static medium, but we can also use them for interaction and interactivity. Let's take a look at a couple examples. So let's look at interactive comics. Comics using digital storytelling. What is the value? Well, one, they can combine visuals, audio, and interactivity. It can enhance engagement and learning, making the learner do critical things like making an important decision or viewing important information or looking for that important information. And it can facilitate narrative-driven experiences. All this very important as we engage our learners and keep them focused on the content that we're providing. So let's take a look at an animated comic and see what kind of results we can get.
Another beautiful fall day at Commonwealth University's Bloomsburg campus. Today seems like any other, but for one young professional, it's about to become extraordinary.
And here we have Carver Hall, one of Bloomsburg's most iconic landmarks. We're proud to offer opportunities for working professionals, students with families, and lifelong learners.
Sure, because balancing a full-time job, deadlines, and, oh yeah, sleep is totally doable. I'm not sure I can even drive here every day. It felt like a day trip just getting here for the tour.
And shows how far we've come.
Am I the only one seeing this?
Institution that is always looking toward the future. All right, let's head to the Care Union building or the Cup.
Now, where did he go? I wish this could work. I really need a new direction. Something meaningful. But this seems impossible right now. Oh, there he is.
You know what's actually been interesting this semester?
I'm chasing a superhero across a university campus. I guess anything is possible.
Hey, wait up!
Gotcha. Okay, he actually went in this one. Wait a minute.
Let's look at the definition of the term gamification.
Whoa. Where does this go? What is this department anyway? This is incredible. How did they even fit this in the building?
So there's an example of a bit of an animated comic, and it draws your attention, uses movement, uses what we know about superheroes. It's a very impactful piece that illustrates the use of comics for gaining attention, for moving the learning and the story along. Now let's look at an interactive comic. This is the famous Haji Kamal created by Kathy Moore. If you haven't seen it, it's really a well done piece. Basically, you are a young lieutenant who is about to meet with the leader in Afghanistan. And he's new, and it says, he's about to screw up. So this has a comic book look and feel. Actually, the images were not drawn. They're actually photographs that were altered to look like a comic. And you can see, remember this format from before with the big long wide on top and then smaller ones at the bottom. And so you click through the experience and you're approaching a house and you see a cannabis field and now you're starting to get a little worried. And now you meet with Haji Kamal. So let's see about this meeting with Haji Kamal.
He could just say, "No thanks, I'm not thirsty." It's okay to be direct if you do it respectfully, and Haji Kamal will respect him for being honest.
It would be more polite to say he's allergic and can't drink chai. Haji Kamal will know it's a white lie, and that's okay. They do it all the time here.
But that would start the relationship out with a lie. Lieutenant Harrell would have to keep it up for his whole deployment.
But he shouldn't just say no. He would offend the Haji from the get-go when we're here to build rapport.
So these two guys are giving you some information about what you should do. And they're coaching you in two different ways. And then Haji says, come in, let me pour you some chai. You can say, "No, thanks, I'm not thirsty," or "I wish I could drink chai, but I'm not allergic to it," or "Thank you, I'll have some." I like chai, so I'm going to say, "Thank you, I'll have some." And then Haji Kamal smiles and pours a cup of chai, and then so it unfolds just like a comic book. And here we can have this other conversation.
The lieutenant should keep the small talk going and compliment Haji Kamal's livestock or crops. He could say something like, "That cannabis field looks very well tended."
We shouldn't bring up the cannabis. We should say something more general like, "Those hills are beautiful." Compliment his country, not his pot.
But bringing up the pot could open the door to talking about how he could grow other crops. Remember, he's just switched allegiance from the insurgents.
The hills are a safer topic, and do we even need more small talk? What if we just get down to business?
So again, you have the audio to give that sense of back and forth, that sense of interaction. So you can use comics that come alive. They don't have to be static elements. So we're not going to continue, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what it's like. I'll put the link in the here in the chat notes so you can check that out. So there you have it, some examples of using comics, interactive comics. So we've talked about comics, we've talked about coloring, talked about a lot of ways which coloring and comics can make your learning more effective. Why don't you give it a try with Action First Comics and coloring and see what your learners take away from what you're putting together.